Collier's was an American magazine, founded in 1888 by Peter Fenelon Collier. It was initially launched as Collier's Once a Week, then changed in 1895 to Collier's Weekly, an illustrated journal, and finally shortened in 1942 to simply Collier's. The magazine ceased publication with the January 4, 1957 issue, though a brief, failed attempt was made to revive the Collier's name with a new magazine in 2012. As a result of Peter Collier's pioneering investigative journalism, Collier's Weekly established a reputation as a proponent of social reform. When attempts by various companies to sue Collier ended in failure, other magazines became involved in what Theodore Roosevelt described as muckraking journalism. History. Irish immigrant Peter F. Collier left Ireland at age 17. Although he went to a seminary to become a priest, he instead started work as a salesman for P. J. Kennedy, publisher of books for the Roman Catholic market. When Collier wanted to boost sales by offering books on a subscription plan, it led to a disagreement with Kennedy, so Collier left to start his own subscription service. P.F. Collier & Son began in 1875, expanding into the largest subscription house in America with sales of 30 million books during the 1900 to 1910 decade. In April 1888, Collier's Once a Week was launched as a magazine of fiction, fact, sensation, wit, humor, news. It was sold with the bi-weekly Collier's Library of Novels and Popular Books at bargain rates and is a stand-alone priced at 7 cents. By 1892, with the circulation climbing past the 250,000 mark, Collier's Once a Week was one of the largest-selling magazines in the United States. The name was changed to Collier's Weekly, an illustrated journal, in 1895. With an emphasis on news, the magazine became a leading exponent of the half-tone news picture. To fully exploit the new technology, Peter Collier recruited James H. Hare, one of the pioneers of photojournalism. Collier's only son, Robert J. Collier, became a full partner in 1898. By 1914, it was known as Collier's, the National Weekly. Peter Collier died in 1909. When Robert Collier died in 1918, he left a will that turned the magazine over to three of his friends: Samuel Dunn, Harry Payne Whitney and Francis Patrick Garvan. The magazine was sold in 1919 to the Crowell Publishing Company. In 1924, Crowell moved the printing operations from New York to Springfield, Ohio, but kept the editorial and business departments in New York. Reasons given for moving print operations included conditions imposed by unions in the printing trade, expansion of the Gansevoort market into the property occupied by the Collier plant, and excessive postage involved in mailing from a seaboard city. Under wartime postal rates, after 1924, printing of the magazine was done at the Crowell Collier printing plant on West Main Street in Springfield, Ohio. The factory complex, which is still standing, was built between 1899 and 1946, and incorporates 7 buildings that together have more than 846,000 square feet, 20 acres, of floor space. Investigative journalism. When Norman Hapgood became editor of Collier's Weekly in 1903, he attracted many leading writers. In May 1906, he commissioned Jack London to cover the San Francisco earthquake, a report accompanied by 16 pages of pictures. Under Hapgood's guidance, Collier's Weekly began publishing the work of investigative journalists such as Samuel Hopkins Adams, Ray Stannard Baker, C.P. Connolly and Ida Tarbell. Hapgood's approach had great impact, resulting in such changes as the reform of the child labor laws, slum clearance and women's suffrage. In April 1905, an article by Upton Sinclair, "Is Chicago Meat Clean?" persuaded the Senate to pass the 1906 Meat Inspection Act. Starting October 7, 1905, Adams startled readers with The Great American Fraud, an 11-part Collier series, analyzing the contents of popular patent medicines. Adams pointed out that the companies producing these medicines were making false claims about the products and some were health hazards. Hapgood launched the series with the following editorial: "In the present number we print the first article in The Great American Fraud series, which is to describe thoroughly the ways and methods, as well as the evils and dangers, of the patent medicine business. This article is but the opening gun of the campaign, and is largely introductory in character, but it will give the reader a good idea of what is to come when Mr. Adams gets down to peculiarities. The next article, to appear 2 weeks hence, will treat of Peruna and the braces, that is, of those concoctions which are advertised and sold as medicines but which in reality are practically cocktails. Since these articles on patent medicine frauds were announced in Collier's some time ago, most of the makers of alcoholic and opiated medicines have been running to cover, and even the government has been awakened to a sense of responsibility. A few weeks ago the Commissioner of Internal Revenue issued an order to his collectors, ordering them to exact a special tax from the manufacturer of every compound composed of distilled spirits, even though drugs have been added thereto. The list of tonics, blood purifiers, and cures that will come under this head has not yet been published by the Treasury Department, but it is bound to include a good many of the beverages which, up to the present time, have been soothing the consciences while stimulating the palates of the temperance folk. The next official move will doubtless be against the opium sellers, but these have likewise taken fright, and several of the most notorious consumption cures no longer include opium or hashish in their concoction. The Great American Fraud had a powerful impact and led to the first Pure Food and Drug Act. The entire series was reprinted by the American Medical Association in a book, The Great American Fraud, which sold 500,000 copies at 50 cents each. Hapgood had a huge influence on public opinion, and between 1909 and 1912, he succeeded in doubling the circulation of Collier's from 500,000 to 1 million. When he moved on to Harper's Weekly in 1912, he was replaced as editor for the next couple years by Robert J. Collier, the son of the founder, Arthur H. Vandenberg. Later to become a prominent senator, had a brief stint as a Collier's editor during the 1900s. H.C. Whitwer was a war correspondent in France during World War I. Rob Wagner covered the film industry for Collier's during the 1920s. They reversed the position on prohibition in 1925. This was due to the difficulty in enforcing the referendum, and people's unwillingness to stay away from alcohol. The new law brought about bribing, thieving, corruption, and other ills, which far exceeded their expectations. This new alignment gained favor with the public and helped to rebuild circulation. Writers such as Martha Gellhorn and Ernest Hemingway, who reported on the Spanish Civil War, helped boost the circulation. Winston Churchill, who wrote an account of the First World War, was a regular contributor during the 1930s, but his series of articles ended in 1939 when he became a minister in the British government. Carl Fick was a Collier's staff writer prior to World War II. Radio. Collier's circulation battle with the Saturday Evening Post led to the creation of the Collier Hour, the magazine of the air, broadcast on the NBC Blue Network from 1927 to 1932. It was radio's first major dramatic anthology series, adapting stories and serials from Collier's, airing on the Wednesday before weekly publication. It later switched to Sundays to avoid spoilers, with stories being aired simultaneously with the magazine. In 1929, in addition to the dramatizations, it offered music, news, sports and comedy serials, serializing novels. During the late 1920s, Collier's Weekly sometimes simultaneously ran two 10-part novels, and non-fiction was also serialized. Between 1913 and 1949, Sax Rohmer's Fu Manchu serials, illustrated by Joseph Clement Cole and others, were hugely popular. The first three Fu Manchu novels by Rohmer were actually compilations of 29 short stories that Rohmer wrote for Collier's. The Mask of Fu Manchu, which was adapted into a 1932 film in a 1951 Bollywood comic book, was first published as a 12-part Collier's serial, running from May 7 to July 23, 1932. The May 7th issue displayed a memorable cover illustration by famed mask maker Vladislav T. Bender, and his mask design for that cover was repeated by many other illustrators in subsequent adaptations and reprints. A 1951 condensed version of the book Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham also appeared. Fiction. Collier's popularized the short story, which was often planned to fit on a single page. Knox Berger was Collier's fiction editor from 1948 to 1951. When he left to edit books for Dell & Fawcett Publications, he was replaced by Eleanor Stearhem Rawson. The numerous authors who contributed fiction to Collier's included Ray Bradbury, Eleanor Hoyt Brainerd, Willa Cather, Roald Dahl, Jack Finney, Earl Stanley Gardner, Zane Grey, Ring Lardner, Sinclair Lewis, E. Phillips Oppenheim, J. D. Salinger, Kurt Vonnegut, Albert Payson, Hunan Walter Tevis. Humor writers included Park Cummings and H. Allen Smith. Illustrators. Leading illustrators contributed to Collier's, including Chesley Bernstall and Charles R. Chickering, who later became a chief designer of U.S. postage stamps. Other accomplished artists included Harold Matthews, Brett Howard, Chandler Christie, Richard V. Coulter, Harrison Fisher, James Montgomery Flagg, Robert Fawcett, Alan Foster, Charles Dana Gibson, Denver Gillen, Percy Leeson, J. C. Leyendecker, Paul Martin, John Allen Maxwell, John Cullen Murphy, Maxfield Parrish, Frederick Remington, Anthony Saris, John Sloan and Frederick Dorr Steele. In 1903, Gibson signed a $100,000 contract, agreeing to deliver 100 pictures during the next 4 years. From 1904 to 1910, Parrish was under exclusive contract to Collier's, which published his famed Arabian Nights paintings in 1906-07. Cartoonists. The magazine's roster of top cartoonists included Charles Addams, Carl Anderson, Stan and Jan Berenstain, Sam Berman, Sam Cobian, Jack Cole, A. B. Frost, Ralph Fuller, Dave Gerard, Vernon Grant, J. Irving, Crockett Johnson, E. W. Kemble, Hank Etcham, George Lichty, David Lowe, Bill Malden, Virgil Parch, Misha Richter, William Steig, Charles Henry, Bill Sykes, Richard Taylor, Glyce Williams, Garn Wilson and Roland B. Wilson. Irving's association with Collier's began in 1932, and his Collier's Cops became a mainstay of the magazine during his 13-year association with it. Kate Osan's Tizzy cartoons first appeared in Collier's. The red-headed Tizzy was a teenage American girl who wore horn-rimmed glasses with triangular lenses. Tizzy was syndicated by NE after Collier's folded. The cartoons were in in color in Collier's but black and white in syndication and paperback reprints. After World War II, Harry Devlin became the top editorial cartoonist at Collier's, one of the few publications then displaying editorial cartoons in full color. During the 1940s, Gurney Williams was the cartoon editor for Collier's American Magazine and Woman's Home Companion, paying $40 to $150 for each cartoon. From a staggering stack of some 2,000 submissions each week, Williams made a weekly selection of 30 to 50 cartoons, lamenting, "The other day I found myself staring at the millionth cartoon submitted to me since I became humor editor here. I wish it could have been fresh and original. Instead, it showed several ostriches with their heads buried in the sand. Two others stood nearby, said one to the other, 'Where is everybody?'" Joseph Barbera, before he found fame in animation, had several cartoons published in Collier's in the late 1920s and early 1930s. Later years. During World War II, with William L. Chenery as editor, Collier's readership reached 2.5 million. In the October 14, 1944 issue, the magazine published one of the first articles about concentration camps. It was Jan Karski's Polish Death Camp, a harrowing account of his visit to Belzec. The now problematic title is explored in Polish Death Camp Controversy. Karski's book Story of a Secret State was published later that year by Houghton Mifflin. It became a Book of the Month Club selection and bestseller with 400,000 copies sold in 1944-45. The Collier's selection was reprinted in Robert H. Abzug's America Views the Holocaust, 1933 to 1945. Collier's had a circulation of 2,846,052 when Walter Davenport took over as editor in 1946, but the magazine began to lose readers during the post-World War II years. Collier's published a regular men's fashion feature contributed by Esquire co-founder Henry L. Jackson and also published long-awaited images from the 200-inch Hale telescope's first light in 1949. In the early 1950s, Collier's ran a groundbreaking series of science-based articles speculating on spaceflight. Man will conquer space soon, which prompted the general public to seriously consider the possibility of a trip to the moon, with the percentage of Americans who believed a manned lunar trip could happen within 50 years changing from 15% to 38% by 1955. In 1951, an entire issue described the events and outcome of a hypothetical war between the United States and the Soviet Union, entitled Preview of the War We Do Not Want. Collier's changed from a weekly to a bi-weekly in August 1953, but it continued to lose money. In 1954, John O'Hara became a columnist with his appointment with O'Hara Column. The magazine ceased publication with the issue for the week ending January 4, 1957. Books. The company also published the Collier's Encyclopedia, Collier Books and the Collier's Yearbook. Patricia Fulford edited over 100 best cartoons from Collier's Ladies' Home Journal, Red Book, The American Magazine, Saturday Evening Post, The New Yorker, Argosy, Sport and Collier's cartoon editor Gurney Williams edited Collier's Kids, cartoons from Collier's About Your Children, Holt, 1952. Collier's fiction editor Knox Berger chose 19 stories for Collier's Best, and he also selected best stories from Collier's. A huge history and collection appeared with the publication of the 558-page A Cavalcade of Collier's, edited by Kenneth McCardle. Cornelius Ryan's 1957 book 1 Minute to Ditch, about the successful ocean ditching of a Pan-American Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, was an expansion of his Collier's article in the December 21, 1956. Ryan was an associate editor of the magazine during the mid-1950s, and the novelist Lonnie Coleman was an editorial associate during that same period. Crowell Collier Broadcasting. In the 1950s, the company expanded into broadcasting, purchasing the San Francisco Bay Area station 910 KLXAM for $750,000 from its original owners, the Tribune Publishing Company of Oakland, which had founded the station 3 decades earlier. Eventually, Crowell Collier owned 3 Chuck Blaw program Top 40 stations: Color Radio 98, KFWB 63, KDWB and Color Radio 91, KEWB. Crowell Collier sold KEWB to Metro Media Radio in April 1966 for nearly $2.5 million, and the station then became New Hollywood's KFWB had been the top AM radio station in Southern California during the late 1950s and early 60s, but it was late catching up to current music trends such as the British invasion and lost market share to other stations such as KRLA Pasadena and the Bill Drake-programmed Boss Radio 93, KHJ Los Angeles, which switched formats to rock and roll in 1965. KFWB was sold to Westinghouse in 1966, for what was then a record price for a radio station, $10 million. By March 1968 it gave up music altogether and switched to an all-news format. Facts, titles: Collier's Once a Week. Once a Week, an illustrated weekly newspaper. Collier's Weekly, an illustrated journal. Collier's The National Weekly. First and last issues. First issue, April 28, 1888. Last issue, January 4, 1957. Publishing frequency: weekly, fortnightly. Publishers: P.F. Collier, New York; P.F. Collier and Son, New York; P.F. Collier and Amp, Son Company. Editorial offices: New York. Publication offices: Springfield, Ohio. Crowell Publishing Company. Editorial offices: New York. Publication offices: Springfield, Ohio. Crowell Collier Publishing Company. Editorial offices: New York. Publication offices: Springfield, Ohio. Editors: Nugent Robinson, Mayo Williamson, Hazeltine, Julius Chambers, T.B. Connery, Daniel Lyons, Robert Joseph Collier, Norman Hapgood, Mark Sullivan, Finley Peter Dunn, Harford Powell Jr., Richard J. Walsh, Lauren Palmer, William L. Chenery, Charles Colbor, Henry Lacossette, Walter Davenport, Louis Ruppel, Roger Dakin, Kenneth McCardle, Paul Clifford Smith, Editor-in-Chief. Read. Collier's.